All right.
All right. Well, welcome everybody to Northminster Presbyterian Church's Zoom session tonight. This is a training session for a new program that we're beginning called the High School Hangout. And the purpose behind this program is for our church to be an after-school safe space for high school students on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays from 3:30 to 5. Our intent is to open our doors, provide a hospitable environment for students who need a place to go, who have some time in between classes and their sporting events, or if somebody just wants to have a place to come and play games, hang out, hence the name. So we've been planning this pretty much all summer long, and it begins next week. And we would like our volunteers, people that are going to be supervising this event, to have this 1 hour conversation, or at least view this 1 hour conversation with our guest tonight, Rebecca Brandau. So the purpose this evening then is Rebecca's going to talk to us about what are some of the things that we can expect from high school students that may come into our space. What are some things that we can look for? What are some pitfalls that we can avoid as students come into this space? Because it frankly is a very complicated time for high school students, and a lot of them are dealing with things that we didn't deal with growing up. So I would like to introduce our speaker tonight. This is Rebecca Brandau, and she is a member of Northminster Presbyterian Church, been for some time now. Her husband, Tom Brandau, they live in State Center, and she has 2 kids, Amelia and Theo. Rebecca has a bachelor's degree in psychology from Iowa State, and she did her graduate work in University of Northern Iowa. Her master's degree is in educational psychology, and she's a specialist degree in school psychology. And she's worked as a school psychologist since 2006, working with teachers, families, and students preschool all the way through high school. Currently, she works at Central Rivers Area Education Agency, and she's assigned to Marshalltown High School and Marshalltown Virtual Academy. Rebecca, did I get everything?
Yes, that's everything.
Okay. Well, we have people joining us on Zoom. I have people live in our office right now who are going to be watching. And of course, we're recording this for any future volunteers that want to help out with the Hangout. So thank you for being here tonight. And can you help me welcome Rebecca with an applause from wherever you are? And Rebecca, I'm going to turn the floor over to you. We anticipate this being an hour-long conversation. There's going to be a PowerPoint that Rebecca is going to use. We will have these PowerPoint slides available to everybody. So don't feel like you have to write down everything that she says, because we'll have it available. But this might be an important time to take some notes if there's something you want to go back to. And Rebecca will leave some time for questioning. So without further ado, I'll leave it to you, Rebecca.
All right. So, well, now we're having technical difficulties because it won't change to my next slide. There we go.
Yeah.
All right. So just a thought to get us going that one person can make a difference and everyone should try. And the reason that I kind of wanted to open with this quote will become apparent as we go through our slides. So just some thoughts to put us in the right frame of mind here. And my slides will not progress again. Should have done a dry run, clearly. Here we go. Okay, so the purpose of the Hangout is to provide a safe space for high school students where they can engage in study, fellowship, and community. And as we go through this, I tried to put most of the things I say on the slides so that you can go back and review them and read them at your leisure. So you don't have to take a ton of notes because the content is written down for you already. But it's really about that safe space for fellowship, community, and study if the kids have homework. So Jim asked me to share some logistics. So there are 2 volunteers that are going to be there every day, and he'd like to have those folks be on a regular rotation or as regular as possible. He wants volunteers to arrive by 3:15 p.m. And then their responsibilities include putting out games and snacks. And he wants to use the fireside room and the gathering space only, with 1 volunteer in each space. The idea is that kids are not going to be roaming around the church or being in the sanctuary unless there's a reason and they have an adult with them. And at 5 p.m., volunteers will clean up and lock doors. The Hangout expectations are really to be respectful and to be responsible. And this gives a common language for conversations with kids, and it's language that they have been exposed to throughout the Ames School District. Ames has used PBIS in the past, which is problem solving language, and they've had school rules and be responsible and be respectful is almost on every school expectation list I've ever seen in my career. So we wanted to start there with those expectations. The purpose of this training is to prepare you for your role as a volunteer at the Hangout, and then also to review some situations that you might encounter. Teenagers today have a lot of different situations that they're dealing with that didn't exist when we were kids. I mean, there was no cell phones, there were no social media. We didn't have to deal with those things. And kind of the world we're living in has led to some mental health issues and different things that you might come across. Not to say that these things will be things that you see, but when I was talking with Jim, we decided it would be best if we kind of overviewed some of this stuff so that if you're in a situation, you've talked about it, you've heard about it, and you kind of have an idea of how to respond versus going, oh shoot, I don't know what to do in this situation. So I don't want you to leave feeling like, oh my gosh, what did I get myself into? Because these are situations that you might encounter, and we just want you to be prepared. It's not saying that you're going to encounter any of these. So, okay, so your role is to create a welcoming environment. I would really encourage folks to greet people when they come in. Hello, welcome to the Hangout. I'm Rebecca. I'm so glad you're here. Be that welcoming presence. Learn names as you can. And the idea is to provide supervision to make sure the kids are safe, but not to be programming for them. This is not where they come to be entertained or where you are in charge of what they're doing, but just providing that supervision so it's a safe space. This is one of my favorite quotes. It's seen a resurgence with the Ted Lasso show, if anyone's familiar with that. But the quote is, be curious, not judgmental. And I think this applies to youth today in a great way, because a lot of times they have very interesting things to say. And I find that it's best to approach that with curiosity and see where it takes you. So with that in mind, being curious, your role is to stay curious, not authoritative. I think sometimes as adults, kids say things, they're exploring things, they're pondering things, and they might have some wild ideas. And as adults, it's really our job to ask questions, but not necessarily to be authoritative or to tell them what to do, how to do it, what to think. Using phrasing such as "I notice," I saying things that you see is a way to engage in conversation without it being perceived as judgmental. So saying things like, oh, I noticed that you have math homework every day. What are you working on? Or, I noticed that most of the time you come and play Pokemon with your friends and they're not here today. Where are they? So just that language can be helpful. Use questioning and avoid lectures. And then also avoid inserting yourself. The kids aren't necessarily there to engage in conversation with the adults. They might want to, but they also might not. And so if they don't, that's okay. You don't have to have lengthy conversations, but be welcoming. So there's kind of like a fine middle ground in there where you're welcoming and supportive, but also not inserting yourself and making them have conversations with you when maybe that's not why they came to the Hangout. So I wanted to talk a little bit about adolescent brain development. Their prefrontal cortex, which is in the front of the brain, which is where the logic and the reasoning, problem solving, abstract reasoning, that all is developing through adolescence. As one of my coworkers likes to say, she's like, Rebecca, but they don't have a prefrontal cortex. And what she means by that is not that they don't have one, but that it's still developing and growing. And so their ability to solve problems is not the same as an adult's ability to solve problems. And so sometimes things that are a big deal to them seem like little deals to us because that reasoning capability hasn't fully developed. Instead, they rely on their amygdala, which is in charge of emotions and impulses. And so you can see how that could cause things that we might not think are a big deal to be big deals. So if you've got a student who is saying that, you know, they're up in arms about something, ask questions, be supportive, but know that they may not have the reasoning capability that you have to think through that and to think through how that's going to end in different ways. So the types of students that are likely to need to come to the Hangout are kids who need a place where they can go hang out with their friends. You know, maybe their friends live across town, and so this is convenient. So they can come see their friends, hang out. Maybe they need a space to land between activities. So they have practice, but practice isn't for another hour. They need a place to go, maybe a place they can land to do homework. And then the third category is kids who don't want to go home, maybe kids that have that home's not a good place, a place that they kind of try to avoid as much as possible. And a lot of this presentation really kind of focuses on that third category of kids, the kids who might have more needs than we typically think of for adolescents. So high school students, stressors and traumas. So many students struggle to know what to do with the things they find stressful. So that goes back to that lack of problem solving. And a lot of kids don't have the coping skills to deal with the things they find stressful. Some of that has to do with not having adults in their life who can model those appropriate coping strategies. And some of our kids have been through multiple traumatic events, especially with things like COVID, where maybe they've lost family members, maybe they have had people lose jobs, which might impact their housing, things like that. Those kinds of events can impact kids, and then how they handle other things in their lives, because those things kind of add up. Trying to switch my slide. Does not want me to do so. Hello, computer. There we go. Okay, so I talked a little bit about this, the COVID-19 pandemic. Social media is huge for kids. Most kids are on social media of some sort. TikTok is probably the most common social media right now. TikTok and Snapchat are what kids are using a lot of, where they can send videos and messages to their friends. And sometimes kids are watching things on social media that aren't really appropriate for kids to be watching, or anyone for that matter at times. And there's things with social media where things can be said through Snapchat. Snapchat's an app where you send a message and it disappears. And so there can be drama that comes from that, where things are said and kids are affected by that. Their home lives can be rough. They can also be very supportive, but they can definitely be a stressor for some kids. Mental health is a huge issue for students right now. I saw a statistic yesterday that said 1 in 5 kids, I believe, has some sort of mental health issue. And then that trauma also can impact the development of that prefrontal cortex. So you've got kids that are supposed to be developing those problem solving skills as they get older. And if they have repeated traumas, it can actually slow down that development and make it so that they have less developed problem solving skills than you would expect for a student of their age. So those are just all things to consider. So things to be aware of, things like depression, anxiety, substance abuse, disagreements among peers, LGBTQIA, which I'll talk about, and then autism. Those are all different diagnoses or mental health diagnoses that can impact kind of what you see from kids, and also maybe how you might respond to different students. So I went through, and in your slides, I defined all of the mental health issues for you, just because I think it's important to have an awareness of what when I'm talking about depression, I'm not talking about how like everyone gets sad sometimes. That's normal. But depression is something that lasts longer, where kids are not interested in really the things that are happening around them and in their lives. And it impacts their ability to do school, to do work, to do their normal daily functioning. In 2020, they estimated that 17% of kids between the ages of 12 and 17 experienced at least one major depressive episode in the last year. This has been going up every year. And so it's higher among females. It's higher among kids who are biracial or have multi-races that they identify as. But it's just, again, these are just things to be aware of. Anxiety, again, it's not just being anxious about an event or something that's short term, but it's where people are anxious about things that are more severe, long lasting, and then it's interfering with their daily life. It's the most common mental health issue found in adolescents. In 2001, 2003, that data said almost 34% of adolescents 13 to 19 report having an anxiety disorder at some point. It's more common for females than males. And I will tell you that the data that's coming out now says that this number is low. So this is something that kids that you meet will likely be dealing with, is anxiety. So if you have a kid who you're like, man, this kid's really depressed or this kid's really anxious, what you need to do is really assess for risk or suicide or harm. And what I don't mean do a risk assessment, but I mean, be aware, is that student verbalizing that they're having suicidal thoughts or behaviors? Are they engaging in self-injury? Are they having panic attacks? Those things require immediate assistance, and you're not a mental health professional. And so there's a number, it's a hotline that actually just went live July 16th. It's 988. And that number you can call, and there's another slide that talks about that too. But that's a number you can call to talk to a mental health professional and to get that student talking to a professional. If it's not something that's acute, if you're like, this kid, I'm kind of worried about them, but they're not displaying anything that makes you think that they're in danger. What can you do? If they want to talk to you, listen non-judgmentally. So be patient. Let them talk. Don't, if they're searching for words, just wait. Don't cut them off. Don't interject. Use open body language. So what that means is have your arms down. Don't sit with your arms crossed. So look like you're welcoming. Ask questions. Open-ended questions are great to show you care and want to understand, and don't interrupt. Substance abuse. Often substance abuse, the most common substance abuse we're seeing right now in teens is vaping, usually some type of marijuana-based substance. It's often a coping strategy to deal with mental health issues or trauma. We also see some alcohol use. The vaping is probably the most common that I come across. And back to the substance abuse, this is probably not, like, I'm thinking this is probably not something you're going to have to deal with, but again, it's something I thought everybody should be aware of, that is common with youth, especially those youth who come from traumatic backgrounds and may not want to go home at the end of the school day. Sometimes kids get very upset about those disagreements with their peers. It's often something that's happened somewhere else and is transferred into a new setting. A lot of times it involves technology. A lot of times it involves social media. So what do you need to do? You need to consider safety. You need to consider legality. If what they're doing, if you're catching them doing things that are illegal, that takes different actions. If they're not safe, then action needs to be taken. But if they're safe and they're just wanting to talk to someone, you can be that listening ear. And if you have kids that are coming every week, they might become comfortable with you and they might start talking to you. And that could become a safe thing for them. When you talk with kids, you should use phrasing, referring back to expectations. So if you've got a kid who is doing something that really kind of goes against the expectations for the Hangout, saying things like this, some of the expectations we have at the Hangout is that everyone here is respectful and responsible. Your actions are not being respectful right now. I'd like to invite you to change your behavior so you can continue to enjoy this space. So by using language in this way, you're talking about their actions. You're not talking about them as a person. You're saying that their actions are an issue, and you're inviting them to change their behavior, which is giving them another opportunity. If students are having disagreements with each other and they're able to talk respectfully, you can kind of guide them through that, back to that lack of problem solving. Sometimes kids need kind of a mediator or someone to walk through that. But it's not your job to be a mediator. So if kids are having a disagreement, you don't have to sit down and help them walk through that, because that's not why you're there. You're a volunteer who's keeping it a safe space. So don't feel that you have to talk them through any disagreements that they're having. LGBTQIA, or a lot of times the IA is left off and people use the plus sign. That stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgendered, queer, intersex, and asexual. There's a link there that has a website that has a glossary of terms. There are a lot of terms that kind of fall within this category. Quite frankly, they can be confusing. And there are a lot of kids right now who are struggling with sexual identity. And that can look different, but having just some background and vocabulary can be helpful. And so I'm not going to go through all of these terms, but I put them in the PowerPoint so that you could go back and read through them if you wanted to. So I defined all of the terms in the LGBTQ plus definition within the slides. There's also a term that is common where kids will say cis or cisgender, which is a person whose sense of personal identity and gender corresponds with their birth sex, typically heterosexual people. And that's a term that's newer, to say someone, and kids will abbreviate it and say, well, you're cis. And that's what they mean when they say that. Excuse me. So adolescent development has always been a time of questioning, where kids are kind of figuring out who they are, what they believe in, what is important to me, what to them, what they value. And this questioning has come to also include sexual orientation. It's become much more commonplace for kids to be open about who they are sexually and to talk about that topic, which is one of the reasons that it was decided to include that in this presentation. So sometimes a student might dress in a way where you're unsure of their gender. And they also may use non-cis pronouns. So we try to be inclusive. And so what we can do is say, what pronouns do you prefer? Don't be surprised if you find a student who uses plural pronouns for themselves as an individual. So they might use they, them, and theirs instead of she or he, him, or her. That is, I've seen that quite a bit, actually. I even have my cousin's daughter goes by they, them, or theirs. I mess it up all the time. And I tell her, you know what, I'll try, I will do my best. And I try. And then if I mess up, correct myself, move on. You can also use their name instead of a pronoun if that's really hard. But And sometimes kids will go by they, them, and theirs for a little bit, and then they're like, no, I'm good with him and he. And so I think it's something to be aware of, something to try to be inclusive with, but I wouldn't get too worried about it. If you know that about a student and you mess it up, that's okay. Just correct yourself and move on. I wouldn't make too big of a deal about it. Allow students to talk to you if they choose to, but don't seek them out to ask questions. I've had kids who come in to school wearing, very kind of gothic kind of wardrobe, or kids who might dress as another gender. You don't need to ask them questions, just be accepting and welcoming of who they are as a person. And if they want to talk to you about it, that's okay, but I wouldn't seek them out. And I also wouldn't make assumptions. You can't necessarily tell someone's sexual orientation by looking at them. And I think at the end of the day, it's important to remember that people are people. And even though someone might not identify in the way that you expected, they're still people. They have hopes, they have dreams, they have likes, they have dislikes. And our job is to be welcoming and to open our arms and welcome them in, not to kind of unpack all that with them. Autism spectrum disorder is a very, very broad category. It includes, characteristics of it include difficulty with communication and social interactions. It also commonly has restrictive or repetitive interests or behaviors. I think it's important to know that all students who are diagnosed with autism or autism spectrum disorder are different. The diagnosis for this has recently been changed. It used to be that sometimes kids were diagnosed as Asperger's, which would mean that they function very, very well, but are on the autism spectrum and are generally pretty intelligent individuals. But I think it's important to know that sometimes kids with autism might walk through your doors. A lot of times people who are on the autism spectrum struggle to make eye contact and struggle to communicate in the way that we might expect. They can have uneven development where they're really knowledgeable in a topic or really gifted in a certain area, but struggle in other areas. So it's just some more information for your knowledge. So what can you do? How do you communicate? Don't force eye contact. They might, if a student is avoiding eye contact by having a conversation with you, that's okay. That might be hard for them. And they might really want to talk about one thing. Things like Pokemon, Dungeons and Dragons, trains, it can be anything. I worked with a kid once who really, really, really loved windshield wipers. And that's what he wanted to talk about all the time. And so if a student is talking about a topic and you shift the topic and they go right back to that topic, just know there may be a reason for that. And you may just have to lean in and talk about windshield wipers. The big takeaways here are to give students the opportunity to be trusted and show that they're trustworthy. We're talking about different psychiatric diagnoses and different mental health diagnoses here for your awareness. But I think that oftentimes we underestimate our youth, and that when they are put in a situation where they feel people genuinely care about them and they don't feel judged, kids can really surprise us. And a lot of times our youth are very interesting people. So again, be curious, not authoritative. Ask questions, but give them space if they're not interested in talking, and don't be discouraged. A lot of times, especially if a kid comes from a background where there's been trauma or where they don't feel safe at home, they have some pretty big walls put up where they don't trust people easily. But if you continue to show you care week after week, you may be able to make a difference in that child's life without really even realizing that you are, because they may decide to lower those walls. Another takeaway is using that phrasing like I noticed. I put some examples in here just to kind of go over what that might look like. It's a really nice way to broach a topic with a student and show that you're observing, you care. And if they don't want to talk, that's okay. The last example here says, I noticed you seem a little sad today. Do you want to talk about it? No? Okay. If you change your mind, just let me know. Again, that idea of being present, being supportive, but not inserting yourself. You are not a mental health professional, nor does anyone expect you to become one. You can talk to adults as a caring adult, or talk to students. You can talk to adults too, but you can talk to students as a caring adult and help them problem solve if they want to. Don't feel you have to. But if the student is in crisis, this 988 number, and the nice thing about this number is kids can call it. They can also text it. And so a lot of previous hotlines didn't have functionality for text. And a lot of our kids are more comfortable with text than they are with phone calls. So they can text the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline and talk to a mental health professional if they are in crisis. So I put a couple quotes here at the end. Both of them are from Mr. Rogers, because I kind of love Mr. Rogers, which is ironic because he was the Presbyterian minister. But we have to love someone is to strive to accept that person is exactly the way he or she is right here and right now. And then the other thought I want to leave you with is, if you could only sense how important you are to the lives of those you meet, how important you can be to the people you may never even dream of. All right. So that was a lot of information. I tried to put it all in text so you could go back and review, but what questions does anyone have? Open in the floor. Oh boy.
Please introduce yourself.
Okay, this is Linda.
Hi, Linda.
Rebecca. So something I don't think has really changed since I was a kid was, if somebody wanted to smoke, they go to the bathroom and smoke. So if somebody wants to vape, then they go to the bathroom and vape, or if they want to go there and smoke or do whatever, how do you handle that situation?
Well, I think that's complicated. On one hand, I don't think it's our job necessarily to follow kids to the bathroom, right? But if it comes to your attention that kids are going to the restroom and doing that, or they're going there in pairs or groups, I think I would probably have a one kid to the restroom at a time policy. What we often see in high schools is that you'll have a kid who has access to something and his friends also go to the bathroom at the same time, or her friends also go to the bathroom at the same time. And if you stand outside the bathroom long enough, suddenly they'll trickle out. And so I would recommend a one kid in the bathroom at a time policy. And then if you catch a kid in there doing something illegal, I think that you have to determine, is this a time for a conversation? Is this a time for legal action? Is this a time for a conversation about whether or not that student is welcome to come back to the hangout? And I can't answer that with like a black and white, hard and fast rule. I think that kids are kids. Sometimes they make mistakes, and that we have to give them opportunities to learn and grow and make better choices. But we also can't have a bunch of kids vaping in the bathroom.
Rebecca,
So,
can you unshare your screen?
oh yes, I sure can.
I don't know.
There you go.
Okay. Good question, Linda. Thank you.
Is
Other
vape-
question?
Is vaping illegal?
It depends on what substance is in the vape and how old the student is.
Oh.
And a lot of times you have no idea what they're vaping.
Hmm.
Most of the time it's some type of THC product or marijuana product, but not always. So
Okay.
I'm not certain of this, and I think that any of the students that are high school students there, whatever they would be vaping, if it's including tobacco, it would be illegal. Even if it's 18, I think Iowa has gone along with the raising, but I'm not sure, and I'm not sure if there's any substances, that are neither tobacco nor marijuana that can be vaped, and I'm not sure whether the legal the paraphernalia is. But yeah, that's a whole nother topic.
Rebecca, this is Jan Barron.
Hi, Jan.
Hi. When you mentioned about an individual who has autism who may not look in your eyes, I was reminded that in many African countries, it is a sign of disrespect to look an adult in the eyes. So if we have some children whose parents were born in Africa, they may have been taught, don't look an individual in their eyes. It's the opposite of what we teach our children.
That is absolutely true, Jan. And I'm glad you brought that up because I didn't even think to include that, but that is 100% true. There's also some communities, particularly in India, where they will nod their head for no and shake their head for yes. So there's cultural differences that we have to be kind of aware of. And I would just say, extend grace, because you might not know what culture kids come from or what their norms are. But yes, thank you, Jan. That is a very good point. Yes, Linda.
I have another question. So you have, there's a student that is in that category where they don't want to go home and it's time to close up. What do you do then?
Sorry. Oh, there's a reason we didn't have this last week, guys. I think I don't think that should be a huge problem. These kids aren't used to having things end. They go to school, school closes, they go home. Most of the time when I see kids who don't want to go home and it becomes an issue, they're younger, they're in elementary school. So I don't anticipate that being a big issue. If it is an issue, I would just reiterate, we close at 5. You can be here until then. At this point, it's time for you to go home. And if they want to talk to you about it, you could have further conversations, but you're also not a mental health provider, right? So.
Okay.
I'll interject a little bit here. I would be careful and caution against wanting to give an individual student a ride home.
Yeah.
And,
Oh, yes.
because it's hard to do that, and a lot of them will ask for a ride home, but I would definitely not do a one-on-one giving somebody a ride home.
Yes, that's a good point. I would say for liability purposes, I mean, even as an employee of an AEA, I have gone with principals to take kids home, but they never go without 2 adults, and that's with little people. So I would be very hesitant to put a high schooler in my car, even with 2 adults. And so, if you need to call someone to give them a ride, or if they need to, use the phone to call a friend, or someone to make arrangements, most of these kids probably have cell phones. I think that would be fine, but I would not say, what happened? I'll give you a ride. I'm going that way anyway. I would very much caution against that.
Rebecca, and Cyride is right outside the church.
Yes. Good
So-
point, Mary Beth. Yes. That's always an option.
And can students ride free now? They could for a while. I don't know now.
I don't know.
I do not know.
I'll find that.
Yeah, they do have reduced priced tickets though, at the very least.
Mhm.
I'll also, I'm
Go
sorry,
ahead.
Dan.
Go ahead.
This is more logistical, but this recording might be viewed by people who don't go to our church, so I'm adding this in there. There are cordless phones, both in the copy room, which may or may not be locked depending on who's volunteering. And there's also a cordless phone located in the kitchen right at the entrance. And so those are available for adults who might need to call from an outside line or call from a church phone. And you just have to dial 9 to get to an outside number.
Is that posted on the phones, Jim, at all? That you have to dial 9?
I will be looking to
I don't
see.
think so.
I don't think it is.
We noticed at the shared blessings last week that the bench in front of the church was not there, and one of the persons who rides a bike needed to sit down. So that brings up the thought to me, can they wait outside if the bench is there? I know they can sit on the floor. And can they also wait in the garden? Or can they go in the garden? And is any part of the church off limits?
Mary Beth, you can speak to this too. And I should have said this at the beginning, that Mary Beth Ostenbrug has been the one who came up with this idea through her and the GROW team. And so she's done a ton of work with this. So jump in here, Mary Beth. In my mind, they can wait outside until we open it. They can go in the garden because they have access to the garden from outdoors anyway. We don't lock the gates. Mm-hmm. I would say inside the church, we're limiting access to the fireside room, the gathering space, and the hallway with the bathrooms so they can use the bathrooms. But I would say we're not going to allow anybody in the north part of the church or the sanctuary. Of course, unless somebody is with them because they want to see something, or you know what I mean. But I think we're limiting to that. Mary Beth, is that correct?
Yes, that's my understanding. And going through a scenario in my head, if I'm the person in the gathering space, the adult in the gathering space, and I notice that someone goes down the hallway to use the restroom, either restroom, I'm just going to kind of keep an eye on my watch, and just use common sense. It doesn't hurt to go to a door and say, is everything okay? Or, if you think it's too long and you don't want to intrude, but again, if they're by themselves, that's the only place they should be going, down that hallway. So.
And will the east door be locked? Will they have to enter from the south?
Yes.
So if we're going to have snacks for them so they won't be in the kitchen?
I envisioned having a snack set out, some of it by the coffee out in the gathering space, and some of it on a table somewhere in the fireside room. So, and the drinks, I bought individual serving cans of pop, and those can be set out as well as the coffee. So I don't see a need for them to be in the kitchen. I just assume they stay in those two rooms.
That brings up a really good point, that there will be, right now, Mary Beth has been providing the snacks, and we're going to find a source for snacks and drinks, but let's count on them being in the refrigerators in the new kitchen. And so that if you are a volunteer and you're putting out snacks, our main kitchen.
Oh, okay.
So
how will the kids?
Go ahead, Harriet.
This is Harriet Den Hartog. How will the kids know when they come in what the parameters are?
It's a good point.
That is a great question. I would have some type of signage saying, you're welcome to use our space, or have someone, whoever's in that gathering space could even greet them, hello, I'm Rebecca, welcome, you're welcome to use our space. You can be in the gathering space here, or you can be in the fireside room there. Other spaces are used for different things, but this is the space used for the hangout, and just let people know as they come in. You might decide you need signage that says, these are the spaces we're using. And you might decide you need signage that says these are kind of our expectations. But I'm hoping that, as you talk to kids as they come in, I'm guessing that the kids who come are going to come repeatedly, and they'll learn. But I would just welcome them and remind them that at the door initially. That's what I would recommend, because you don't want it to feel like a really structured school-like place. You want it to be welcoming.
How about if some of the students say, I need to study, could we have an area that's a quiet space set aside? Because it might be that some would want to read or study while they wait.
Yeah, I think a lot of this initially is going to be determining what the needs are and what is it that these students who are coming, what is it they want to do? Do they want to play Pokemon, which I know that's going to happen, or do they need quiet study space? But I think we can kind of adjust as we go with that.
Well, I think, what's reasonable. So I think as, when I was a teenager, I'd have seen that garden. I would have been like, there's a table out there. Can I go sit out there?
Yeah.
And I think that's probably reasonable. It's within sight of the person who's in the gathering space. So long as they're respectful and responsible, I would say, sure. Now there's, like the Sunday school room is not in the space where the volunteers will be able to see the people. And so I would say, we're not using that space today, but you can use the chairs in the gathering space. Those are comfortable to sit in. There's a table set up in the fireside room. If it's too loud for kids to study, a lot of kids, kids have headphones. Most of them have AirPods.
Yeah.
AirPods are, I'll show you. AirPods are headphones from the Apple people. You'll see kids walking around with them. They look like this. And they'll just walk around with those in their ears all the time. But so most kids have headphones, noise canceling headphones. So I wouldn't be too worried about it. But if kids are being really loud and kids are saying, hey, I can't study because it's too loud, just a quiet reminder, hey, we're trying to be respectful here to everyone. And some kids are trying to study. Do you think you could bring your noise volume down a little bit? Or could you move this game into this other space? I think that when we talk to kids from a real honest place and are authentic with them, they respond really well to that. Does that help?
How about a code to the internet if they need to get on the internet? What's that?
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you, most of their homework's going to require the internet. It's all cloud-based. Most Ames is a one-to-one school. All the kids have some type of computer. I think they have Chromebooks there. I'm not sure. But they all have a computer, and most of their assignments are submitted via Google or there's different sharing sites, different teachers will use, like Canvas, where kids will submit their assignments electronically. So I think that the internet's probably going to be something that's going to be required if kids are going to do homework there.
And Mary Beth and I talked about this too, and we went back and forth with it, but in the end, it goes back to what Rebecca said in her presentation is most kids are trustworthy. Let's give them a chance to be trustworthy, and let's, and so we have a guest Wi-Fi network with a password that will be available for volunteers to give kids who would like to do homework. And as volunteers, I'm not saying you got to stand over their shoulder, but just be aware of what's going on, and we can.
Well, and I would recommend walking around. You walk around behind kids, they're much less likely to be doing things that are suspicious that they shouldn't be doing because they know you might walk around behind them again. So just be visible and walk around in whatever space that you're assigned to, that you're in.
More questions? Keep them coming, folks.
Are we going to have anything that will tell them that we have worship and youth group available?
I think, in my opinion, and we can talk about this as it evolves, but I'm not going to stand there with a pamphlet as they walk through the door.
No.
I think that's a good conversation to have. I'm hoping they ask about our sanctuary. Hey, there's a drum set in there. Where do you use that? Well, we use it on Sunday mornings, and I would let that information come organically than, hey, we're bringing you in here to try and get you to do something.
Yeah.
Right.
I would agree with Jim, and I would say that if the kids feel that your purpose is something other than what you're telling them it is, they won't come.
I'll see it too.
Mark, you had a question.
Yeah, can we restrict internet access? In other words, you can say, I call it parental controls, where there are certain types of sites that they won't be able to get to.
I don't have the answer to that.
I'm pretty
If
sure we can.
anybody else knows that.
Ask
It's gonna
Alex.
depend on your router and your internet provider and those services. There's programs you can purchase to do that. It's really dependent upon the internet and how you have it set up within the church. So those are probably questions for someone who's not here tonight.
But the concept I like. We can look into it for sure.
Yeah, we have Whitney
We do have Whitney.
Have Alex too.
And
we have Alex. Yeah, I think that's just a simple thing to do.
other questions, other comments, other things?
This is Deanna, and sorry I don't have my camera on, but internet at the farm is a little iffy today. I think this is a great idea, and I'm looking forward to this. I am telling Jose, I go, get the communication out, and be the leader of the kids that are there to respect the house of your house of worship. And I really think somebody made a comment about the kids being good. I really think I believe that. I'm not saying that we're not going to encounter some tough situations, but with the kids like Jose and Levi coming here and having the connection to the church, and also both of those boys are in Scouts and knowing how to act and interact with other kids, I truly believe this is going to be a success. I really do.
Good.
I love that. Absolutely love that. Thank you.
Well, and
Deanna.
Deanna, one of the cool things I think
You're
about that
welcome.
is that Jose and Levi are also kind of setting an example. They're comfortable in this space already. And I hope
Yeah,
that
that's-
really influences the friends they bring and the other students who come.
I agree with you, Rebecca. Those two boys are big Pokemon card players. I've heard Jose on the phone with his friends talking about going to the church. We can hang out. We can bring our Pokemon cards.
Good.
So, yeah, you're going to get, I truly believe, and I've been praying about this, we're going to get some good kids there, and we're going to be planting some excellent seeds.
Go ahead.
I assume if it's a nice day, they can go outside, can't they?
I think so. Yeah, I would.
Yeah.
I think that,
Space is open. If they want to go throw a football around, that hey, or
well,
something.
you know, we have two posts there and there's supposed to be a volleyball net between them.
That's right.
And we should use that. We should have a net there and a ball. Because there might
teacher
be
has
some
spoken.
girls coming. Pardon?
So the PE teacher has spoken.
Yes, that's right.
Linda, did you have something?
I was just telling Mark, we have a volleyball, it's a badminton net. We got
Oh.
a net. Volleyball.
Again, I'm really hoping somebody brings their guitar. Like you never know. It all depends on what the needs are and what the interests are of the kids that come. So we'll see. We'll definitely see. I want to respect our presenters' time, and it is 7 o'clock. Is there any last minute things that you need some information on? While you're thinking, the one thing I forgot to mention, currently, the games that we have, like card games, board games, they're located by the mailboxes in the hallway. There's a cabinet that opens up, and I'll put a sign on it for next week, but that's where we're keeping the high school hangout games for now. So that's where the games are. Food's in the fridge. Those two things you should be able to find those two things.
Yeah, and there's a note of that in the slides as well. If you need to, if you're like, wait, what did Jim say? It's in there. You can go back and review that.
I want to say thanks so much,
Yes.
Rebecca, for your presentation. It's been really helpful. A lot of the questions I had have been answered, and I
Oh,
really
good.
appreciate.
It
Yeah.
was, I agree.
Well done. Well done.
You join
Well,
me in
thank you.
thanking Rebecca?
Yes.
She's really good at what she does, definitely.
Yep.
And so thank you for taking the time with us, Rebecca, this evening. And all of you that have signed in tonight, I'm just going to assume that you want to be on our rotation list at some point. And, you know, it's going to take, starting out, at least 2 people a day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or I'm sorry, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So we really could use the help and the rotation. Mary Beth will be contacting you. Sorry, Mary Beth.
Well, and I would just like to say
You got all the names?
thank you all for volunteering. I think, I mean, to kind of echo what Deanna said, I think this is a really great thing. And I think it's going to go well. And, you know, I felt, I was telling Jim, I said, I feel like this presentation is all these like negative things that could be negative that you have to deal with, but it's better to be informed than to be caught off guard. And I think that most of the kids you're going to encounter are going to be just great little souls that are happy to be there. And I can't wait to see what happens with this. I think it's cool.
I agree.
I'm going to, since we are a church and this is a church function, I'm going to pray us out tonight because I want to ask God to bless this new endeavor. And so however you want to pray, will you pray with me? Almighty God, we thank you for this evening. Thank you for Rebecca, and she has such a calling, and it is a wonderful calling that she does very well. Thank you for helping us become more informed and try and understand where our kids are today. Lord, we ask for your blessing for this new endeavor. It's risky, it may be overwhelming, but also, God, we sense the joy in it, and it feels like what we need to be doing right now for our neighbors who are the high school kids. So I pray, God, for every kid that's thinking about coming to this or wondering about what it is, I pray that you would guide them here if this is truly where they need to be, so that we can be an opening, welcoming, and hospitable community to our neighbors. Bless us as we go about our week, go about our weekend, and continue to love and serve you. And all God's people said,
Amen.
all right, I'm going to end this meeting, which should end the recording. And I will put out, I'll edit some of this presentation and then put it out for availability for anybody that may want to volunteer in the future. God bless you all. Rebecca, thank you again, and have a good night.
Thank you.
Night.
Bye,
Bye,
Deanna.
bye, Deanna.